Hi, and welcome to episode 1 of my podcast. Ooh, I'm so excited to be here. So just honoring where I'm at today and how I'm feeling. I got a lot of energy going in my body. I'm a little nervous. I'm just going to own it. I'm just going to claim it so I don't shame it. I'm just a little bit nervous, but I think it's a good thing. So today, where I thought we would begin with the first episode, is with me being a little vulnerable and telling you a little bit about my story. I have complex PTSD and PMDD, which stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. You can think of it like extreme PMS, but it is debilitating and has a lot of depressive symptoms that really impact my quality of life and have been a constant challenge for me basically since I started my period. Part of my healing journey has been finding ways of coping, relating, and healing my PMDD. And it's been a journey, and I'm not perfect. And in fact, I'm in my PMDD week right now. So some folks call it Hell Week because it's often that bad. It feels pretty awful. And I've been really struggling for the past few days with my inner critic. And being in relationship with it made me think, why don't we talk about it together? So just to give a very brief opening about PMDD, PMDD is a depressive mood disorder, but it is impacted based on your hormone fluctuations that naturally happen in the body. And as best as we can understand, folks with PMDD are people who are just very sensitive to those hormone fluctuations. Some common symptoms with PMDD is that the week before your period, you feel not yourself. You feel like a totally different person. Things you once found interesting, you have no interest in whatsoever. Debilitating depression, intense inner critic. There's even physical symptoms, bloating, body pain. Some women have an extreme breast tenderness that can come online during their PMDD. And also brain fog, where you just really can't think. And I just want to be clear that this is not normal PMS. This is a debilitating disorder. So it's not fun. We can just say that. So a part of my journey has been to make my PMDD manageable. And the way in which I have done that is trying to reframe my relationship to my PMDD, because I can't help it. It's going to come every month. And with a disorder where you feel like you have no control, I think it's really empowering to recognize the moments that you do have control, or where you can find your agency. And for me, my agency and empowerment with PMDD has been in my own ability to change the way I relate and change the way I think about my PMDD. So I often think of my PMDD as this kind of beast, this like monster, and my journey with it of trying to make the beast beautiful, trying to find a way to make it bearable and manageable. So, with PMDD, it can sometimes feel like this huge, massive thing that is just totally overwhelming. And then when you're low resourced, when you're in your PMDD episode, it feels almost near impossible to do the work in the moment. It's really hard. It's really hard to be mindful during that time. It's really hard to even want to exercise or move your body. I mean, it is the hero's journey every month. You have to fight that dragon every single month. So one way that I have really changed the way that I relate to my PMDD is focusing on what piece of my PMDD that's happening now is the loudest. What's the one thing that I am struggling with so badly that I feel like I can't do the things that I want to do. I feel kind of the wall of awful with it. So with my intention of being vulnerable, a couple days ago, my inner critic got really loud. This usually happens when my PMDD is pretty intense. So the other day, I actually tried to sit down and record a first episode, and it was awful. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty bad. And the thing that was making it really bad was all the things that my PMDD and the inner critic was telling me. I mean, and for folks out there who have PMDD, you know this, but your PMDD knows exactly what to say to you to make you feel the lowest. It's like the enemy that has observed you for so long that now it knows exactly how to crush you. And that's what was happening to me a few days ago. I was really fighting it. I was really trying to stick to this schedule that I had given myself of okay, today I'm going to record and I'm going to do the thing and this is what I'm going to talk about. And it was like every time I went to talk into the microphone, it feels like a different entity. It feels like this external voice is just saying the most awful and horrible things to you. And it is really hard not to believe it. And even though I have been in practice with my PMDD in this way, some days, some nights, the PMDD wins. And I had to stop recording, step away, and I had to move into my spiritual practice, which is a huge safe haven for me. So I identify as a witch. I kind of lean into taboos a little bit, but really it's a reclaiming. Witch actually means wise. So by calling myself a witch, I'm identifying with the inner wise woman inside of me that has my higher and greatest good and really kind of pushes me towards self-compassion, self-love, and listening to my body as a friend instead of fighting it or berating myself because I have some limitations going on. With PMDD, I often find that it can infiltrate almost any aspect of my life. And in the past, it has infiltrated my relationships. It has infiltrated my dancing, my artistic pursuits. It has infiltrated my education. I mean, it touches everything. But the one place that it has never touched me is actually my spiritual practice. So for me, that container is a place where I get to have a break from my PMDD. Even when I am in such disarray and disorganization that I can't record a podcast, I can always retreat into my spiritual practice and I get a little distance. I get a little break. Sometimes I call it my island of relief. So I kind of want to share with you the story of what happened a few days ago. So like I said, 2 days ago, I'm sitting in this exact spot and I'm trying to record some episodes. And it was very clunky. I couldn't get into the flow. I couldn't stick to the script that I had written. I mean, it was a mess. And I noticed this sensation inside of myself where I started to feel very defeated and very small. And now my inner critic rides through the portal of frustration for me. Like when things get a little hard, when I feel out of flow, when I start to feel frustrated, it's like a doorway for that inner critic to just take this megaphone and start screaming in my ear. And I sat here for an hour and I actually kind of tried to work through it. I moved into the somatic practices that I know from psychotherapy. I was regulating myself and I still couldn't do it because once I regulated my nervous system down, as soon as I tried to move back into what was activating my inner critic, it was right back there. So that night was actually a full moon. And on full moons, I sit out on my porch, I light a candle, and I deeply meditate with myself. And I realized nothing that I record is going to be good. Like, I'm just not there today. So I closed everything up. I sort of threw my hands up in defeat, and I moved into my safe space. I moved into my island of relief. So I set up my space on my porch where I'm surrounded by my plants. I can see the moon shining super bright, and I just immediately feel that inner critic disappear. It's nowhere to be seen. And there was this softening that happened in my body where I just was it was like my whole body finally took an exhale. And I was able to really ground and relax. So a piece of my spiritual practice is something that I call journeying. It's taken from shamanic journeying. And if you look out there, you can find many practitioners that kind of talk about it. But essentially, what my practice is in that is that I soften my focus. Sometimes I have an intention, sometimes I don't. And I can actually have these very vivid psychedelic experiences completely sober. And now this has been a practice that I have cultivated over years. But that's why I call it journeying, because I'm leaving this state of reality for a non-ordinary state of reality. So that night I journeyed, and I found myself at one point in this swamp-like bayou scene. It was nighttime, and there were all of these fireflies everywhere, and it felt totally safe. And kind of out on the water, on this like little island, was this cottage, and it was covered in moss, and there was something so familiar about it to me. And there was this warm light glowing out of the windows. And I walk into this cottage, and there, sitting on a couch, is this old lady. And she's just so happy that I'm there. She's just so warm and inviting. And looking back now, I can really take that in as me coming into contact with my inner wise woman. And so I sat on the couch, and I'm just spending some time with her. And I remember her asking me what my intention was. And I actually didn't have an intention. Like, I didn't formally think about where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And even just her asking me that question made me think about how even recording the podcast earlier when I was trying, I hadn't really come into contact with my intention yet. And she said, well, you aren't going to go anywhere without intention. And there is something for me that just was very profound. And then she said, your mind is what you feed it. And when I heard her say that, as I'm sitting in this like warm little cottage in the middle of this swamp, hearing all of these little like nature sounds everywhere, I really took in, oh, if I let myself believe my inner critic, then I'm going to believe it. I'm going to take it in as truth. And it is going to incapacitate me. And then I'm never going to have the things that I want. I'm never going to speak my truth. I'm never going to share these things that I have found so profound and healing. I stayed out there, as I say, journeying for quite a while after that. And I had some other profound moments, but those are just for me. But there was something so profound about the safety that I was able to find inside my own psyche during that moment that was facilitated through my spiritual practice. And as my body is sitting on my porch in real time in this physical form, I noticed my shoulders softening. I noticed my belly relax. And there was this awareness of how much tension I had been holding. And after hearing those words of connecting to my own inner wise woman, my whole body relaxed. And I felt really good. And now for someone who's in their PMDD episode, having a moment where you feel really good is rare, given how intense my episode was that evening. And even though I've done these practices for quite a while, I'm still shocked by how useful they are for me. I'm still awed and amazed at the power of my own relationship to myself and the power to offer myself safety in that moment. Because I've had this experience, I want to offer kind of how I think about my PMDD now. So I think of the week of my PMDD as being a non-ordinary state of reality, where everything feels like it gets flipped and inverted, where things that usually don't bother me now really bother me. Things that normally would never make me angry or set me off, now it's all I can do not to explode and erupt in this chaos that's happening. And the more that I have viewed my PMDD within that realm as a non-ordinary state of reality, it kind of allows me to create some psychic distance where now I'm able to view that time as I'm just riding this wave of experience. So rather than being so coupled with my PMDD, there is a part of me that I've cultivated that is observing what is happening to me. And that psychic distance is really helpful because then it starts to give you space, just enough space, to be able to see what is actually you and what is your PMDD. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by what's actually you and what is your PMDD? Well, way back in the day when I was just struggle bussing with my PMDD, I found it very tricky because I was very identified with my PMDD. For example, I just thought that I was inherently broken. I actually thought at some point in my life I was evil. I thought I just was not capable of having consistent, emotional, loving connections with people because there would reach a point where I would feel nothing towards someone. In fact, I would feel literally nothing. And that's a bit of the darker side of PMDD where, that piece I said around things you usually find interesting, now you don't find interesting at all, that can also happen with relationships. So people that I was really liking and in a new relationship with, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited, that week would hit and then boom, I would be disgusted by them. I would legit be repulsed and I wouldn't want to touch them. I wouldn't want to hang out with them. And I remember giving those thoughts a lot of space. I would really take them as truth, and that's where I started to allow my PMDD to be a part of my personality structure, believing that, I guess I'm just a 3-week date, once 3 weeks is up, I'm uninterested. And then there were, a couple of other things, but that's That's an example of me becoming very identified with my PMDD. So at one point in my life, I really found someone that I deeply cared about, and I really wanted the relationship to work a lot. I was having these deep feelings that I never thought I could have before. And something in that relationship opened the capacity for me to really witness how maybe I'm not an evil, cold bitch that, can't love or can't consistently love. And I loved this person so much, and surprise, surprise, it's my partner that I'm currently with. But there was something so deep about that love that I had for him that really made me question when my PMDD hit. When my PMDD and my inner critic and this voice inside of my head is saying, like, you can't stand him, you don't like him, he doesn't like you. That just was like, no, you're wrong. Like, you're really wrong. And I started fighting against my PMDD at first. I started fighting it. And what this fighting looked like was that I would either isolate and hide during that week until it was over, and then I felt like myself again, or I would just be really mean to myself. Like, I hated my PMDD. I would feel it coming and I'd just be like, oh God, like, here we go. I'm going to pick up my sword and I'm going to pick up my shield and I'm going to beat this beast down. And it worked for a little bit, but it wasn't sustainable. And it wasn't sustainable because I was really vilifying my PMDD and dreading it. One of my practices is that I track my cycle to the day. So I know the exact day when my PMDD is going to hit. And I would not schedule anything during that week because I was like, it's going to be awful. It's going to be so awful. I can't put anybody else through this. And I'm just going to have to really, fight this thing. I started therapy. I, was in my graduate program. And as I was working through my trauma and processing that, I started to feel like something was missing, that a critical piece of my healing journey wasn't being honored. And that's when I really dove into cultivating a spiritual practice that worked for me. And in an effort to find relief from my PMDD, I leaned into ritual. I leaned even into casting a few spells. And I leaned into cultivating my inner world to be my island of safety. Whereas I, laid these crystals down, there was something somatic about the weight of them, the way they felt, that started to even ground my body into, this is a sacred space of safety for you to have a break from your PMDD. And the more that I did that practice, it's like more capacity happened. And now I felt like I wasn't fighting against my body. I felt like my body was on board with it. And so during that hell week, which actually often lines up with the moon phases, I would just dive into ceremony and devotion with myself. And, this is going to sound really, really woo in the moment, but I started loving my PMDD. I started meeting it as a friend in need. And I started looking at my symptoms in a different light. And I've spoken about this before, but I was actually working with a Jungian hypnotherapist who gave me one of the most powerful reframes that I've ever received in relationship to my PMDD, where she said, what if your PMDD was an opportunity for you to feel all the emotions that you have avoided and bypassed for the entire month. And it was like something clicked in my brain where now I felt like my PMDD was giving me purpose, because I was being honored with this very real, intense experience. But the benefit of it was that I was getting a somatic download of just how much this body can take. And I can take a lot. I can handle a lot. And I feel like that deep well of capacity to withstand my own suffering has given me this deep well and capacity to be in the wake of other people's suffering and to hold that space and to not be afraid of it. And because I have gone through my own journey with this shit, I get to hold on to hope for them when hope is not accessible. And so, in a way, I really view that my PMDD has also made me a really good therapist and capable and willing to lean into the pain with people. Because what I've found is that when I give my PMDD the space to be felt, there's always relief at the other side of it. Now, I want to be really clear here. I'm not saying that PMDD is going to give you magical, wonderful powers. It's not, right? It's not going to open up this fantasy world where you start to journey with yourself and you have these very intense psychedelic experiences. That's not what I'm saying. And in fact, I still struggle some weeks where my PMDD is so bad that I don't have access to my spiritual practice. That some days all I can do is lay on my bed and stare at Netflix. I'm not actually watching it, but it's on and it's distracting me from my experience. And so I just want to offer that space that still happens to me. And that's okay. It's okay for it to be too much. And it's okay for you to do whatever you need just to get through it. Some days, all we can do is tread that water and keep our head above it. And there's no shame in that. But what I am trying to offer is that sometimes when the beast hits that hard and we're riding those waves, sometimes there's just a little lift where we don't have to work as hard, where some capacity opens up inside of ourselves. And it's in that window of opportunity that I really work at building my own internal resources so that I can tread water longer. I hope that makes sense. And now my inner critic is coming in just a little bit in this moment where it's Elizabeth, are you sure you're being super clear? I don't know, but I'm just going to take a moment to be I hear you. Yes, I am aware that you're there. Very valid question. And we'll find out. We'll find out if people get it. So to kind of just gently move this along, something that I'm trying to offer as a practice is that when we're in those moments of our PMDD, when we have a glimpse of awareness, where you can almost have that experience of watching yourself in it, to find a way to harness the power of your own inner wise woman, your inner protector, the inner cottage, the island of safety inside of yourself. So that rather than being so trapped with your inner critic, you have these internal resources that give you a choice where you can either choose to sit in the shit with it, or you can choose to kindly leave it alone and go somewhere else for a time. For me personally, I have cultivated those protective parts inside of myself and more psychic distance from my PMDD through the vehicle of my spiritual practice, which from an outside perspective is actually a very, very mindfulness-rooted practice where I take quite a lot of time to be with myself and to feed the part of my mind that is giving me a blip of my inner nurturer or my inner helper or my inner whatever you want to call it. Like, we have so many archetypes within ourselves. And I've found that when I'm paying more attention, when I'm feeding the sweetest, kindest, most mothering, nurturing parts of me, and they come online during my PMDD, and they mother me through that moment, my PMDD is not as intense. Often I have like days where it's like one day happens to be a whole lot easier, which is the one that I'm in now. Like, I'm still in my PMDD, but I'm nowhere near as bad as I was a couple days ago. And it's because I have given myself a break. I've taken time to just rest, and I've loved myself. There's a line, and I'm really bad with quotes. I'm actually really bad at remembering who said these quotes. But it was something along the lines of, there is nothing that harshness does that loving fierceness doesn't do better. And so just like taking that in, you can love a thing, and by loving it, you actually gain more relief, create space, whatever you want to call it. Something happens where it becomes a bit more bearable. And now I know this is probably really difficult for some of you out there who are really in your hell week, who are having such a struggle with PMDD, and I get it. I've been there, and some weeks I'm there. But when we can build more capacity to love all the parts of ourselves, even the PMDD part, it just cultivates more self-compassion. And that used to be a loaded word for me. I used to freaking hate self-compassion. I was like, what the, like I got really offended by it. But the more that I've leaned into my practice, the more I've bought into it, that one of the strongest healing tools we can offer ourselves on a daily basis that actually works is self-compassion. I'm taking a moment. I just paused, and that was because I was having a bit of a wave of my PMDD. And yet again, the inner critic popped right in, like, I'm in it. I'm in it with you all. If anybody else out there, their inner critic is really loud, we're treading the same waters. And in that moment, my inner critic started to really pound me on if I actually said what I wanted to say. Like, if I actually was clear enough or had the through line or whatever. And there's a part of me that's also coming online, which is my, the old inner wise woman sitting in the middle of her swamp that is just saying, trust yourself. Like, I can see her in the theater of my mind, still sitting on the couch. The wrinkles on her face are really these like adornments of wisdom that are like sparkling, kind of like rainbows in a way. And she's just telling me, trust yourself. You got it. And so I feel like I'm being showered in a way, in like one of the best ways right now, with self-compassion as I talk about it. Whew. Well, there we go. we're reaching the end. I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. My wish for anyone who's out there that's going through their PMDD is that you can find an island of relief today, even if it's in the land of YouTube or the land of Netflix, something that, brings you relief. And yeah, I'm really grateful. And I'm also here to say that you're not alone. Like, I get what it's like to be in it. I'm in it right now, and you're not alone in it. All right. I look forward to spending more time with you. And until next time, take care. Bye.